What if Snow White never met the dwarves? What if the age-old tale of Miner meets Miners was wiped from the books like a stain on the cottage floor? Would our pasty white protag still live to be the fairest of them all? Or would the evil queen's assassination attempts actually prove fruitful this time around? Would our 7 little men of the forest be affected if they were none the wiser to the princess's plight? And where would Snow possibly go to hide if she was never directed to their cottage in the woods? Well, as the internet starts hoarding gasoline for the trash fire release of the Snow White remake, I think it would be nice to light a more cozy inferno of my own as I cuddle up by the fireplace and tell you all what could have been if Disney's revolutionary first flick played things a little differently. My name is Dr. Box, and I shall be your guide through this plane of existence in the Animation Multiverse.
Have a bite?
Hey, keep your black magic fruit to yourself, you crazy witch! Let's begin with a little part 1 recap of this timeless tale. I mean, it's been, what, over 80 years since it first released? Can't say I blame you if you're a little rusty on the story. Once upon a time, there was a princess named Snow White, and after her parents decided that living wasn't really their thing, she was left to the devices of her wicked queenly stepmother, who forced her to dress in rags and wash the castle for a living. The queen wanted her beauty to trump all others in her kingdom, even consulting a magic mirror once in a while just to double check. And for a time, her life wish was fulfilled. But as the servile brat got a bit older, the magic mirror was like, "Hey girl, your little doll in rags just claimed your title," which made her understandably jealous. And so with her cattiness at an all-time high, the queen hires a huntsman to drag Snowy to a secluded place and carve out the poor princess's ticker, while painting the fields of flowers with blood as red as the rose. So, you know, the huntsman obviously doesn't want to go through with it, but the queen pretty much infers that it's either her heart or his, so he doesn't have much of a choice. And so with her delicate back turned, an opportunity arises to do the deed.
And stop! Perfect!
Alright, time to mix things up a bit. So in the original story, Huntsy drops his knife and tells Snow White to run into the forest and hide far away, anywhere but here. Makes sense for the most part. He doesn't know about the magic mirror and assumes that the sooner she leaves the kingdom, the further away she'll go and the harder it will be for the queen to find her. But as a man of the woods, it always did kind of confuse me why he told her to just run blindly into the forest, where there are tons of cliff sides and swamps and rough terrain that a terrified kid wouldn't be aware of and could fall victim to. It's true that most of the fauna is pretty tame, as the most dangerous animals we see in the movie are vultures, and they're not interested in any food if it still has a pulse. And I imagine the huntsman wasn't thinking super clearly and just told her to get away now, no matter what the cost. But still, in any other scenario, that decision probably would have killed her quicker than any dagger ever could. Heck, in the original Brothers Grimm fairy tale, Snow actually runs into the forest of her own volition after pleading for her life, and the huntsman, knowing the place is dangerous, just assumes she'll die in there anyway. So in this new version of mine, the huntsman is still going to ignore the queen's orders, but this time instead of telling Snow to just make a break for it, he'll actually go into the forest with her to ensure that she stays out of danger. Snow would still be terrified of rushing through this dark, unfamiliar place, and her nightmare-inducing visions would still occur as they dash through the trees, but this time the huntsman would be there to help her navigate this scary place and hopefully calm her nerves much quicker. Honestly, I could totally picture the classic scary forest scene from the original being recontextualized into a Prince Philip vs. Maleficent type fight scene, where the huntsman hacks all of these demonic figments to pieces with his tools, being symbolic of the huntsman quelling the young princess's worries, like a mix of action and horror with bold colors and flashes, and things becoming more bright and hopeful as more and more of these monsters are defeated. A classic twist on an old favorite. Could be fun. He'd set up a small makeshift shelter in a clearing or a cave and tell the princess to stay put while he tries to get the queen off their trail. He'll even leave her with some food and water in case he's gone for longer than he expects. While Snow waits for his return, she would get better acquainted with the local wildlife like in the original, but she wouldn't be quite so desperate for a place to stay since she already has one. Plus her savior insisted that she stay where she is. The animals would still provide for her though, bringing her some extra rations to ensure that she doesn't go hungry, like nuts and berries. The huntsman would pull the old pig heart in the box trick, classic, and maybe when he returns, Snow could have a little feast ready for him, a way for the two of them to calmly catch their breath after their grand escape. The Huntsman's a little apprehensive to stick around, as he feels that the Queen could easily still see through his ruse if she gets someone to examine the heart he left her, but Snow insists that he take a break to relax and just soak in everything around him, and he eventually accepts. The two strike up a conversation, and we get to learn a little more about their origins and their relationship with one another. I personally always enjoyed the idea of the Huntsman being like a family friend to Snow White, who's had her best interests at heart for a long time. The way he calls her little princess, and is extremely apprehensive about slaying her, just gives me the vibe that they have some kind of history. Heck, in some bits of external material, like the Dark Horse comic adaptation, the Huntsman is portrayed as one of the few people who was truly kind to Snow White after her father's passing. Certain written works, like the Villain series of novels, even state that he served the kingdom for years, like being the king's great-uncle's servant. We're not going to take either of these directly into account since they're basically just reimaginings, but the idea of an old family friend looking after Snow who has no loving family members in the present could create an interesting dynamic for the two. They could share life stories, Snow's animal friends could join in the fun, and the Huntsman, who usually just goes into the forest for business and not for pleasure, would be able to appreciate the beauty of nature a little bit, instead of just charging through it with tunnel vision looking for food and supplies. Speaking of which, I imagine the animals wouldn't exactly be very fond of the Huntsman at first, considering he did, turn their kin into chops and kebabs, but Snow would vouch for him, saying that he saved her life, and he is very kind deep down. But she does recommend that he apologize to the animals, which he does. He even vows not to kill them for rations anymore, and stick to things like nuts and berries alone. The first one to extend an olive branch to the Huntsman is the baby bird that Snow first talked to before the Huntsman's murder attempt, as he saw his moral compass firsthand, and eventually the rest of the animals follow suit. They'll likely have a few awkward dinner parties in the future, but the animals agreed to have a truce with the man and even help him out alongside Snow. After a nice relaxing woodsy picnic, the Huntsman admits that he hasn't felt this at peace with the world in a long time. The little princess really is a ray of sunshine in the darkest of times, and the world would be at a great loss if she were not in it. She then says, why should the two of them stop there? Are there any other natural sights in these woods that he never took the time to appreciate? And the Huntsman does say that there is a beautiful waterfall up in the mountains that he often sees in the distance during his daily rounds. Perhaps they could watch the sunset there and even relocate to the mountains so they're not in the same place for too long. Snow thinks that sounds delightful, and the two of them make their way uphill. By the time they reach the mountains, the dwarfs have already hightailed their hoes out of their workspace, so no one would be there to disturb our main duo. As the two of them watch the sun settle down for the evening, with the gentle sound of rushing water nearby, and their fauna friends nestling in trees and cliffs around them, they contemplate everything that happened that day, and how fortunate they are to have who they have. Snow has someone that she can lean on for protection and reassurance, someone who has her best interests at heart and has for a long time. And Huntsy has someone with a more innocent, wide-eyed view of the world, helping him respect the beauty that surrounds him and letting him unwind when his nerves are shot to the moon. It's a really sweet father-daughter type connection, and the duo definitely make each other better people. But as night swiftly approaches, he says that the two of them better start seeking shelter. He rarely ever goes to the mountains, but there are likely plenty of caves throughout these crags that would be befitting of at least a single night's stay. The question is, though, which ones are occupied? Traveling cautiously by torchlight and keeping an eye out for anything threatening, the two are unable to find any caves suitable for an overnight slumber, until they see something that really catches their eyes. Not only do they find a decently sized cavern, but one filled to the brim with beautiful shining gems of all shapes and colors, riches beyond imagination that could sell for a few pretty pennies no matter what kingdom they go to. The Huntsman almost feels like cheering at the top of his voice that they're rich! They're rich! But Snow is very quick to stop him, and after taking the torch from him, points out that there is mining equipment everywhere that he neglected to spot check, meaning that this is likely someone's mining operation on privately owned property. They can't just steal from them. The Huntsman is insistent that they won't miss just one or two precious stones. They've got enough riches in this one cavern to last them a lifetime. Heck, maybe even 7 lifetimes. This would be perfect to pay for food, supplies, and lodging if they somehow can't provide for themselves in the future. But Snow White insists that just because they're living as refugees doesn't mean they need to steal. The Huntsman eventually caves and says that if they're not going to take shelter in this mine, then they better get moving. Eventually, they do find a cave to rest in for the night, way out of earshot of the dwarves' dig site, and are at last able to sleep. The only one who can't sleep a wink is the baby bird. He feels kinda worried for Snow and Huntsy, and in the same way that Snow helped him, he wants to help them. He wakes up his parents and tells them to follow him down to the mine. He points to the vault, which conveniently has the key just hanging on the hook next to it. Thanks, Dopey. And at first the parents think he's gonna steal, but he tells them that he's just gonna wait for the owners to return and politely ask them if he can have one of the gems. The parents aren't entirely sure of this plan, but hey, at least the little guy's heart is in the right place. So they use the key to open up the vault, and Baby Bird picks out a decently sized white diamond that looks like it could be sold for a small fortune on its own. They place it in the middle of Doc's inspection table, and the three birds decide to sleep next to it for the night. That way the owners will see them when they come to work the next morning. Sure enough, the 7 men arrive at the old gem-filled hole bright and early, and just as Doc is about to man his workstation, he sees 3 birds cozying up to one of their gems. He obviously wakes them up, wanting to know how they got their wings on that thing. And somehow they're able to communicate that they need this gem for a close friend of theirs. Maybe they write a message in the dirt, maybe one of the dwarves is able to speak bird, maybe Sleepy just spits out a strangely prophetic guess like he did in the original. One way or another, the dwarves get the message. And Doc agrees that the birds can take one of their gems if they all agree as a party. He says with a smile, "Alright men, I want to see hands in the middle if you're okay with this bird parting with one of our diamonds." Happy is on board pretty much immediately, he's always fine with helping a friend, with Bashful, Sneezy, and Sleepy soon to follow. Doc counts up all 7 hands and is about to give them permission, before he realizes that Dopey actually put 2 hands in. Grumpy meanwhile is standing on the sidelines with his pickaxe and has yet to agree. He thinks this whole thing is ridiculous. What would a bird's friend want with a diamond anyway? And Happy says, "Well, I don't know, maybe they just like the way it shimmers and shines like a star. That's what Dopey loves about him, right Dope?" And he nods in agreement. Bashful butts in and says, "You know, I'd do anything for one of my friends. Heck, I couldn't imagine what life would be like without you fellers." And the 6 of them share a little laugh together. All the other dwarves pester Grumpy to change his mind, and while it does take him a little bit, he looks at the face of the little baby bird, his inner softy kicks in, and he finally folds. But he demands that the birds take good care of that gem. If their friend really does need it that badly, it's best that they bring it to them in as perfect a shape as possible. The birds promise, and then swift as the wind, they carry the gem off into the distance as the dwarves all smile and go back to the old grind once again. When Snow White and the Huntsman wake up, they're greeted by the glorious glimmer of a beautiful diamond that brightens up the entire cave with rainbow light. Snow asks where such a wonderful stone could have come from, and the bird family says that they actually asked the owners of the mine if they could take something home for their dear friend. Snow White insists on thanking these lovely people, but the Huntsman stops her, saying that the more people who know that they're out there, the more likely it is that word could get back to the queen, so it's best that they keep a low profile. Snow isn't exactly thrilled about this, but she accepts, as the 2 of them trudge deeper into the forest. Speaking of the queen, she rolls up to her reflective confidant and asks him the classic question. "Am I still the fairest of them all? I've got the heart in the box and everything." And the mirror responds, "Thy beauty is fair, but thy mind is weak. There's a pig's heart in that box, sweet cheeks." So, yep, the queen finds out that she was duped, and after asking the mirror for some GPS guidance, she sees that the Huntsman is a big old traitor, and he and Snow have been on the move for hours. She decides to take matters into her own hands like in the original, but instead of becoming an unassuming, wrinkly old prune, she figures that if Snow and Huntsy are going to be on the move so often, she'd need a form that's a little more mobile. Snow seems to have a strong affinity for the creatures of the forest and pretty much accepts whatever offering of food and drink they bring to her without question, so why not disguise herself as one of them to abuse her good and trusting nature? She would have to be quick about it though, because the longer she waits, the harder it will be to find them since they basically never stop traveling. So she creates a potion to disguise herself as a harmless little bird, and of course creates a piece of poison fruit to take with her. Maybe something smaller than an apple that she can actually carry, like a raspberry or something. However, this fruit would be left in the evil potion for much longer than the apple was, and it ends up being so potent that any other food it touches would be tainted with the poison as well. So all she'd have to do is place this raspberry in their ration supply, and anyone that eats from it would succumb to the sleepy death effects. However, she does rush through her spells quite a bit since time is of the essence, maybe missing like 1 or 2 small ingredients as she goes. It seems to work fine though, as she quickly gains the form she was after. She takes a bit of time to gain control of her wings, and then flies right out the window and starts scoping out the forest for Snow and Huntsy's location. She eventually finds them camping out in another clearing far beyond civilization, and spies on them from afar, perched on a tree branch. Snow says that she wants to make the Huntsman a little treat like a pie or a tart or a fruit salad to thank him for all he's done, for protecting her, listening to her, and trying to understand her. And all the animals pitch in with whatever their little noses can find. This includes the queen, who comes in with this plump, ripe little raspberry clenched in her talons. The animals at first are a little put off since they've never seen this bird around before, but Snow is very quick to trust the little creature, saying that you should never be rude to potential new friends. You should always be welcoming and hospitable. So the little bird plops its raspberry into their pile of victuals as Snow gets to work on the pie. The Huntsman eventually returns with things like wood for a fire and vines to use for lashings, and when he comes back, he finds a humble little pastry waiting there for him. Snow says that she is extremely grateful for everything he's done for her, so the animals and her all pitched in to make him a little something. The Huntsman eventually goes into a little appreciation speech of his own, thanking each and every one of the creatures for looking out for the two of them, until he abruptly stops. He stares at one of the birds very closely, and notices something a tad off about it. It's hard for him to fully describe, but maybe the eye color appears very ominous and unnatural when you look at it in the shadows, like it goes from white and blue to yellow and red or something. A negligible but still detectable side effect of the queen rushing the spell to complete her plan faster. He also takes note of how apprehensive the other animals are, not even wanting to sit on the same branch as this bird. Both subtle and obvious tells that something is up. Snow insists they partake in the pie, but the Huntsman says he has yet to wash up, so he'll just head down to the river real quick. The Huntsman grabs his bow and arrow on the way out and hides behind a tree, completely out of sight. He readies his one shot, taking aim at the suspicious-looking bird and taking note of any more strange behavior. Snow, meanwhile, is curious if her pie turned out as good as she hoped, so she decides to try one slice, and if it tastes a bit odd, maybe she can add some extra fixins before the Huntsman gets back. But the Huntsman sees her out of the corner of his eye and shouts, "Don't!" forcing him to miss his shot and all the forest animals to run away in a panic. The queen realizes he's onto her and dives in to attack the Huntsman. The Huntsman brandishes his knife to take swipes at the bird, with Snow White trying to hold him down, saying that he promised no more hunting the animals. The Huntsman says that she doesn't understand. There's something about this bird that's unnatural and malicious. The evil look in its eyes, the behavior of the other creatures, the way it smirked at her as she was about to eat that pie. He could sense that something was not right, he just didn't know what. But before he can explain further, while he's distracted, the queen dives in and claws out one of the Huntsman's eyes, weakening his sight and preventing him from shooting her out of the sky. Snow tells the other animals to stop that bird from getting away, and working together, they all chase down the bird and eventually subdue it. Maybe by ripping it apart, Scar style. It's no giant boulder death, but at least the queen meets her fate, even if they never find out it was her. Snow White tends to her old friend's wounds and apologizes for being over-accepting of this unfamiliar creature. While being kind and trusting are truly wonderful traits to have, being too kind and too trusting can also be a hindrance, as acting without caution or suspicion is a one-way ticket to an untimely demise, and Snow's actions have now led to permanent lasting consequences for someone she truly cares about. But the Huntsman says there is no need for her to weep. While his one eye will take some getting used to, he would rather exist in this way knowing she was safe than have anything happen to her. She helps to fashion an eye patch using some torn fabric from her own dress, and he looks as good as new, just with a bit less depth perception. From that day on, Snow White and the Huntsman continued their travels, eventually leaving their old kingdom entirely and either living their lives in the wilderness or just assuming new identities in a far-off kingdom. They would use the diamond they acquired long ago to pay their way and start their new lives on a good note. They'd often question whether or not that wicked queen is still searching for them to this day, unaware of the fact that she was destroyed long ago, slain by the very creatures she seeks to hide amongst. A morbid fate only fit for the most cruel and vain of mistress mistresses. Without any monarchs or remaining heirs, I'm not entirely sure what would become of Snow's old kingdom. It could crumble into chaos, it could re-establish a new system of governing, it could get taken over by a neighboring territory. Whatever happens though, Snow White and the Huntsman would not need to worry about it any longer. They were free at last. Free of the Queen's tyranny, free of their rags and their cruel obligations, free to enjoy their lives with the newfound wisdom and friends they've gained along the way. The Huntsman with his new appreciation for nature and the world around him, and Snow White with her newfound sense of cautiousness, which would allow her to preserve the lives of herself and others. The dwarves would have never met the princess personally, so they'd probably still be total slobs, but they'll always have each other. And hey, their lucrative little mining business is more than enough to keep them afloat financially for years. So long as Dopey remembers to take the key with him this time. And the prince? I don't know, dude's pretty good looking, he's got a decent singing voice, he'll probably find love one day. Just try a tavern instead of a funeral next time, you'll probably get better results. So yeah, that's my Snow White AU for all of you. Sorry if it's a little lighter compared to my other ones, but Snow White isn't exactly super heavy on story. I think I covered all the essentials though. We've got two main stars, both of which grow as characters. The Queen still gets to be a cunning villain, the dwarves get an understated yet impactful cameo, and there are plenty of moments for the audience to just breathe and take in the nice visuals like the characters do. We could probably even squeeze in a song or two during some of the downtime. I think it'd be a fun little adventure, just like the original. Alright, I'm gonna go take refuge in my fallout shelter until the Snow White 2025 remake drama finally fades away. But as I take inventory of my canned goods, what do you guys think? Do you think Snow White's life would still turn out okay without her septuplet of little friends? What planes of the multiverse should we explore next? Leave your thoughts and suggestions in the comments below. Thanks for tuning in everybody, and I hope to see you all real soon.